Alright, we are live. So, welcome everyone to another episode of Meta Musings. I am ZeroCardinality here with Sotere. How are you doing today, Sotere?
Ooh, fine as always, fine as always. Thank you very much. I actually have a hair in my eye. It's terrible. Going?
Getting your Frontier back?
Yeah, I gotta work on it, I guess. I cut everything off last weekend. Right after the show, I guess. I decided, it's time for the hair to go. Anyways.
Alright, well, as usual, we have our unconventional support of the week. So, and you, as usual, you can tell by the picture in the middle, and we are going to talk about support Shen today. So
I'm excited. Are you excited?
I mean, it's not exactly the most unconventional support, but I don't think we've covered Shen yet, so might as well talk about him. So what are some good things about the support Shen?
Well, Shen is nice in the sense that he brings a lot of CC to the table, an AoE CC with Shadow Dash that can be game breaking if you land it properly in a team fight. Now, it's not incredibly easy to do so, and if you're a support, you're not going to have the items necessarily to do so. But in addition to that, he has good harass, good laning presence, a very nice ultimate that can help multiple people around the map. You'll see him being unconventional because he is kind of outshone by others, but that is kind of essentially what he brings. Some poke down in the bottom lane, some decent amount of CC, and utility through his ultimate.
Yep, and I mean, as you said, he is pretty good in laning phase. He has that poke. He has a little bit of sustain if he wants to use his Vorpal Blade to help his AD carry. Heal up some, and he has that Shadow Dash, which is good CC. Say if you have a gank in your lane, you can CC them, or you can get away. So it's good for laning phase, and also he does scale with health. So support items typically have health. For example, Shirelia's has health. If you want to go with the Heart of Gold for your second GP10, that gives you health. So in general, support items tend to give you some health, and so having a support champion that scales with health is very useful, and Shen does that. So he's good for that as well. And as Sudhir mentioned, in team fights, he could have a game-breaking Shadow Dash, which could basically just win that fight for you if you can manage to get it on everybody. So a good champion in that sense, and he can still be very tanky despite not having a lot of items.
Yeah, I mean, certainly his feint does help him tank a little bit extra. He doesn't have to build any damage items to do kind of relevant damage, which is a nice thing to have. Someone who's going to be doing relevant damage throughout the game. I mean, it's not going to be game-breaking damage or anything else that you could expect, but it's going to be more so than most other supports. Janna, Taric, Sona, kind of arguable. But one thing that he doesn't really excel in, I mean, he has Stand United, which is great if he's top lane or in the jungle. But if you're in the bottom lane, you can't really use it to go to the other lanes, because then suddenly you're leaving your own AD carry alone, which is not such a great idea. Also, the shield isn't incredibly strong at early levels, so you really kind of value getting levels on him. He's like an AP character in that sense, that you really want him to get level 11, then level 16, because the shield ramps up from 250 to 550 to 850, which is a pretty significant jump throughout the levels. And mainly, at 250, a lot of times people will get bursted through it. For example, if your top laner is getting ganked, a lot of times that extra 250 health might not save them. You might not even teleport in, or you might teleport in and suddenly, they're already dead, or they're just on the brink of being dead, and now you're in a situation 2-on-1 and you're not very happy either, since you're not doing a lot of damage, and you don't have that many items as you are a support champion.
Yep. And one other thing is that Shen is banned out frequently because he has that great ult, and and whenever Shen is picked, he's usually taken top or even jungle over support. So it can be hard to actually be able to pick Shen for that support role if you want to play him there.
Yeah, and we kind of thought about it because he is an old style support. It used to be he was one of the main people that would go bottom lane because he had the combination of tanky, bruiserness, CC, so on and so forth, that would allow him to go against other bottom lanes that were popular back in the day before you sent AD carry support bottom lane, like the Scion Garen combinations and stuff like that. So he used to fill this role. He doesn't quite fill it as well anymore, but as we mentioned, we kind of highlighted what he can do. What he can't do, we've also kind of highlighted, I suppose. But he is kind of in a tricky situation. The other reason I kind of thought we could talk about this and it might be semi-relevant is because he has received like 5 nerfs in a row. He got a rework which made him super strong, and then he received a bunch of nerfs, including a Shadow Daff nerf in this latest patch, just increasing the cooldown of that. But what it means is his laning presence top is getting weaker and weaker, and his jungling is decent, but it's not really great. He doesn't have fast clear time, so really if you put a really fast clearer against him, like a Shyvana, Mundo, or Udyr, he can really be punished in the jungle, and you're not really too afraid of running into him in the jungle. He definitely needs help generally to take you down. So he has weaknesses in both that top lane and the jungle, and he's still very, very great to have, even if you're not going to give him a lot of farm, and that's kind of the position he is in the jungle, because he allows for your team to open up split pushing opportunities, gives that shield, gives a shadow dash, and is all around just a good champion to have. So if you can't put him top, you can't put him in the jungle, but they leave him open, then you can also bring him bottom lane.
Yep. So, I mean, it's a very situational pick, to say the least, but still a good option in the bot lane as a support if you so desire. So that is our support Shen for you. I think we had actually a question that we wanted to answer in our meta mailbag.
Oh, let us get to that a little bit later, because I'll have to look it up. And I should have sent it to you early, because it was kind of towards us and kind of towards the Trinity Force podcast, and it was a very involved question. So we might actually have to get to it next week, and with both of us having reviewed it for a while. But I'll type it out to you over the course of this. Let's get into our main topic, though, and perhaps jump back to that later.
Let's go to our main topic then, and this is something that's actually pretty recent. It's been used recently in the last tournament in the NA Regional Finals. Where at the NA regional tournament, where actually Chowster used this strategy, and it is, let me bring a picture for you guys. Promote. Yep, using
promote.
That guy's
strong. I think he's using steroids or something.
Yeah, and he has a
natural.
Yeah, I mean, guy's like too buff. I can't. Yeah. Anyway, promote is a summoner spell, if you don't know, that can make a cannon minion a stronger cannon minion, I guess.
A siege minion or something along those lines.
So it makes him a lot stronger, has a lot more health, and one thing that's actually interesting is that if a promoted minion kills any minions, you get that gold too. Which really isn't what you're using it for, but basically the idea is you want to use this promoted minion to help like push lanes or push down towers. And CLG we saw use the strategy where they had a promote and they had 3 teleports. They would just teleport all around the map. They would push lanes, use the promoted minion to help push lanes, push down towers, and basically just keep up a lot of pressure in all the lanes with their global presence and with this promote.
Yeah, absolutely. And technically, I guess the verbiage is you turn the siege minion into an anti-turret cannon. So that's kind of fitting, because generally you want to use it to get turrets. And CLG used it extensively throughout the regional tournament to mixed success. I mean, they did get 3rd place, which is obviously good. They qualified for Season 3 championships, but you could argue that they could make it there without these different sort of strategies. They also used this over in Korea too against CLG EU. Didn't work there either, but we did see it work sometimes and not work other times. But I really liked how they used it in a lot of instances, and I believe the casters, mentioned there were some games that went on so long, they're like, oh, well, now promote doesn't really give them any sort of advantage because there's super minions all around the map, so on and so forth. But one thing that it really did was late game, it actually helped stall. The other team would get Baron, Chowster would promote a minion on bottom, someone would push out top, and really then they had to, make sure they had to push back all the different lanes, and it took the other team, the opposing team, who had an advantage at that time, a while to make sure all the lanes were okay and moving in their direction. So I really like the choice. I mean, certainly it is a strategy that your whole team kind of has to be on board with, often coupled with teleports and whatnot. But there are a lot of things you can do with promote to help out your team and to help out promote as the skill. Like, if you just take it as it is, it might not be super effective, but there's ways to increase the effectiveness, mainly, of course, getting the related mastery. And there's actually a number of related masteries. There's a directly related mastery, Summoner's Insight, which is going to increase the stats, but then you also want to get all of the anti-turret masteries, mainly demolitionist, and Siege Commander both work really well in addition to it, and suddenly you just start taking out turrets really fast. We saw CLG really liked comboing it with Sivir as well, because of course her ultimate will speed up all the minions around her and all of her allies, so it made for really quick turrets.
Yep, and one thing that we actually saw is that, let's say you have a Baron dance going on when both teams are grouped around Baron. If you promote, say, bot lane's Minion, make it into a, what was it called again? Anti-turret Minion?
Anti-turret Canyon.
Yeah, the anti-turret cannon. So if you turn it into that, it's going to start pushing, and the other team is going to have to, defend against that, because it's just going to push your towers down. So they might have to send one person down, and now automatically you have an advantage in the Baron dance because it's so far away from Baron. So it's really just using that to help take objectives, not just turrets, but also things like Dragon or Baron.
Right. And another thing, I mean, we've kind of been working on an article that will eventually be released in like a year or two. But, a lot of people don't value promote because, as the casters mentioned, late game when there's super minions all around the map, it becomes incredibly less effective and you can't promote your own super minions, so on and so forth. Once the inhibitors are down, kind of, that's it. But once the inhibitor is down, generally the games are over. We normally don't have, 80-minute slugfest like we saw
Dignitas and CLG.
Yeah, exactly. We normally don't have those types of games. So when you don't have those types of games, promote is really effective throughout, a large portion of the game, like 90% of the game, until those inhibitors are down. Obviously, it's not going to do too much for you in team fights, but it's going to help you manipulate the minion waves, which is incredibly, incredibly useful. And the other thing is it allows you for early pushes, and Brian has been doing a wonderful piece on, getting those early towers is a lot more effective than getting late towers. And I heard another stat, I think was kind of roaming around during the NA regionals, that a team that's ahead at 12 minutes wins like 92% of the time. So getting those early turrets, getting the early dragon, any sort of early advantage is big, because everything does kind of snowball. And, games can be come back from. We've seen some incredible games. CLG EU in particular is really adept at farming up, but that doesn't change, the statistics in that getting that early lead is huge, because it tends to be, okay, you have a 500, 1,000 gold lead at 10 minutes in. Well, because you have that lead, you're able to take Dragon, you're able to take these turrets, then you just kind of keep on expanding on that lead, and the other team has to play defensively, doesn't want to force fights because they're down in items, and then you can kind of just whittle away, get those extra objectives, get those towers, the dragons, eventually, position yourself for Baron and so forth. But promote is a great way to get yourself that really, really early advantage.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that you can't, I think we've, made this clear, but I just want to make it even more clear that you can't just take promote and expect to do well. You really have to have a strategy going in, and usually the strategy is taking early objectives and just trying to control the map and control the objectives, Dragon, Baron, and taking towers. So you really want to have that strategy in mind. You want to have your entire team on board with this, because otherwise you just end up promoting a minion in lane and do nothing with it, and that's the worst. Yeah, that's the worst possible scenario, because that's just basically wasting a summoner skill, which could be used in something like Ignite or Exhaust, which could be great in fights. Right here, what you're doing with taking promote is you're sacrificing some of that power in these fights, in these trades, and trying to put that into developing more power in objectives, so that you can get more gold, and so that you can basically try to snowball off taking objectives rather than snowball off trying to kill the enemy champions.
Right. And yeah, certainly a great team cohesion helps out monumentally. But there were a number of times I saw Chowster. For instance, one time I watched him, he stayed back in base. He promoted the top lane siege minion into the anti-turret cannon, and then they just left it alone. It actually took a turret like all by itself, and basically, it was a full turret. And I think what happened, it was kind of early on, and I think there was like a dragon dance afterwards, and so they just like got a free turret just by using that summoner spell. So in that sense, it's really good. But you have to be careful. When you get into a team fight, you're not going to have that extra exhaust that could change the tides of the battle there. So as Brian said, be very careful. Know your limits. Know exactly what it's going to give you. You're not going to be as strong in lane against a ignite exhaust combination if you are carrying promote, for instance, on your support. So you can fix that, or you can kind of modify the advantages, because that would be an inherent disadvantage. But if you suddenly swap yourself to a 2v1 lane, well, then it doesn't matter quite as much. You're not going to have a disadvantage. You're going to have the advantage all the way through. You will have to be careful, because if ganks come in, you're not going to have that extra exhaust. But in general, you're not going to be at a disadvantage to be engaged upon at any given time.
Yep. So it's the basics of using promote in your team comp. So I know you have this promote jungle Nunu. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh my goodness, yeah, I've been thinking about this basically forever. And the idea essentially was, Nunu likes to push. Like, that's what Nunu does. So the idea was just to take smite and promote, and I've done it a couple times. Actually, I think I'm like 5-0 in normal games. I won't do it in ranked because I'm afraid of people really raging at me, but I win all the time. And the idea is, you go into a lane, you gank, you get a kill or you don't get a kill. I mean, ideally you get the kill, and you're like, bonus. If you don't get the kill though, then you just promote the minion. I mean, obviously you're going to have to time your waves, because essentially, not essentially, the cannon minions come every 3 waves, which is essentially every minute and a half. So you kind of have to time your ganks so that the canyon minion is going to come. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to use that extra promote. But it's great with Nunu because, say if you get the kill, great. You have essentially 2 people and then the canyon minion to take down a turret. You're going to be able to do it really quick. You probably don't even need the canyon minion. If you don't get the kill, or you exchange 1 for 1, which happens in a lot of ganks, like your top laner dies, their top laner dies, especially if they're behind, well, then you have a canyon minion and you're also able to blood boil it, which is a really nice feature of Nunu, being able to blood boil minions along with allies. So if your ally's in lane, you probably want to boost the ally up. But if you only have the promoted minion in lane, you can boost them, and it will make for really fast turret taking. And it's helpful for Nunu because in general he's not actually that good at it. You can always promote any other sort of minion, just auto attack it, but he's not doesn't have a great presence, a great ability to take turrets. And the great thing about it is you don't always need flash. I mean, it's nice if you want to counter jungle rather. I mixed up counter gank and counter jungle.
Counter
jank. Counter jank. That's a mixture. If you want to do that, flash is really nice to have on him just to get yourself out of sticky situations. But promote is more of a strategy. They might have safe laners. They have a really fast jungler like an Udyr or Shyvana, so on and so forth, that you don't think you're really going to need or want to counter jungle them. Then you can swap up your strategies and go for those early turret kills, which are going to be great, because with Nunu, he has a good early game, but he really loves the late game, and it's all about giving your team as much gold as possible. And with a Nunu, that kind of rings true in 2 respects. One, you have the promote, you're getting those towers early, and that's really helpful. But also, he scales really well into the late game because Blood Boil gives your attack damage carry 65% movement, or 65% attack speed, steroid, and a 15% or thereabouts movement speed steroid. So you really want to get into team fights with Nunu, as he's one of the better junglers, team fight junglers, just because of all the utility he brings. But you also want to get into those team fights with a lead, and that's what the promote is going to allow you to do.
Yep. So, I mean, again, it's a similar trade-off as you're doing with in the lanes. You're taking away that flash in this case, which lose some of that mobility. You might not be able to counter jungle as much because you have to play a lot safer. But you're trying to basically take down objectives, and you're just going to try to push down lanes, push down towers, and help out when you're taking, like, say, for example, Dragon or Baron. So really, promote is, if used correctly, it can really help your team take those early objectives and later objectives, just objectives in general. And you just have to make sure that you use promote in that way because you're using a summoner spell to try to get that advantage.
Right. Um, I mean, I have heard a lot of people, and I think this kind of is true. If you play without flash for a while, you suddenly do become more careful and more aware of the map because you know you don't have any sort of escape. Whereas if you have flash, and even if your flash is down, you tend to play a little bit more aggressively. And I think that's why Riot doesn't want to remove flash from the game because it allows for aggressive play. But you'll see people counter jungling without flash when it's down, so you just have to counter jungle in the same fashion where you're very, very careful. So I think we might have exhausted the promote talk.
No pun intended.
Because yes, exactly. It's either exhaust or promote, not the both of them. But I do have the question here. It is actually relatively long-winded, and it's from NL Demo, who's been writing questions to us and Trinity Force. And essentially the question is, I'm level 20. He loves jungling, but what happens is there's a 2v1 situation top lane, and they always tend to lose really hard top, and because he's not level 30, he doesn't really get out of the jungle very healthy, nor is he able to, gank as frequently as he would like. And so my quick and, short answer to him was, it's going to be hard to jungle before level 30, both for you and for the top laner, because it's just going to be hard to sustain top. And if you can't, immediately gank out of the jungle, if you can't be a really strong presence top lane, they're simply going to lose, and you're not going to be able to, overcome that with being a presence in the other lanes. But since I've always been a fan of like 2v1 or 2v2 top, anyway, I think this kind of rings true in changing the meta, because Riot has for so long trying to make jungling non-essential, even at high levels of play. And how they've been doing this is decreasing the amount of solo experience people in the top lane get over the duo lane. So it used to be, the solo would get level 5 when the duo was level 3 really easily without, anything, even if they were zoned out for a little bit. And nowadays, you barely get a level ahead, only at certain situations, if you're not zoned out completely, and if they aren't super aggressive underneath the tower. So I don't know, maybe you want to take that and talk about either thing, the jungling before 30 or the 2v2 or 2v1 lane.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about going 2-1-2, I believe, on this show before. That was a while ago, but just the idea that you deny the top laner so much that not having a jungler, it's again a trade-off where you deny the top laner, the enemy top laner, so much that it outweighs the benefits of having a jungler. And I mean, in this case, it's something very similar, where if you go in the jungle, you are depriving your top lane of a champion. But I mean, can you really provide enough of a benefit from the jungle to justify it? It's actually kind of like the opposite question, like whether you want to go in the jungle when the below 30 meta is to have a 2-on-2 lane setup. So there's that, and if you communicate with your team that you're going to go jungle, they can maybe prepare for it better. Maybe try to pick some champions that do better in 2v1 lanes, or just try to basically pick so that you know that you're going to go up against a 2v1 lane, and try to mitigate some of the damage that, or some of the disadvantages of going up against a 2v1 lane, so that your jungler has a better chance of making more of an impact.
I also told them, if you're going to do this, let them be prepared, and essentially don't really jungle. Take a buff, run top gank, take a buff, run top gank, because it's just going to be so very hard on that 1v2 laner. It's nearly, I'm not going to say it's nearly impossible, because at lower levels of play, people aren't going to be accustomed to going 2v1, so they'll probably just push up the lane and won't necessarily zone you out of a lot of creeps, but it's going to be hard regardless. And, the way it is now, turrets don't do so much damage that level 2 ganks are, impossible. And actually, we see this in tournaments all the time. And there's also a strategy I like to call the TSM strategy. I don't want to give them too much credit, but they've performed this in, I think, 2 consecutive games over the NA regionals where they knew it was going to be a 2v1, or they scheduled it to be a 2v1, and they zone out the solo laner for the first 2 minion waves, and then when the third wave comes in, they know, oh, it's going to push to the turret, so they push really hard, but they also have their jungler come around, and they have a 3-man gank on the turret. Almost always ends up in first blood. It's only 4 minutes in. In the game we talked about, did we talk about this last week? The Jace game?
The Jace game? I don't believe we talked about the Jace game. We talked about when TSM took that tower really early.
Right, well that was Jace.
Oh, was that Jace?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Jace was the one who was against Kayle, and we're like, oh, well now they have nothing to do.
Yeah. I believe that was it, yeah.
Right. So yeah, essentially, that was a situation where they worked everything out. They had like a plan. It was a very clear-cut plan. Okay, we're going to zone them out for 2 minion waves. We're going to then tower dive them, and they'll still be level 2, or they'll be level 1. All of us will be level 2. It'll be a relatively easy tower dive. It was actually, I think Odd One got in there, but he actually wasn't even needed to do damage. Then they took the tower, and taking the tower is questionable because they had a huge advantage, but then they swapped back down to bottom lane. So certainly, kind of ties everything together in the sense that that was a different strategy to get an early tower, but you can also do that 2v1 without the extra help from the gank if you bring in promote and really put a lot of pressure on that tower.
Yep, and I believe that's basically it for jungling before level 30. One thing you also have to remember is that because your jungle clears probably aren't as good as level 30, as summoners who are at level 30, you have to be careful to keep up in levels. So you don't want to gank too much, because you're going to have to try to clear some. And I mean, if you gank and you get kills, that's good. It will help you develop those levels, but you just try to keep an eye on your levels and make sure you're at least keeping up, because that could be a problem.
Yeah, certainly can be a problem. So I guess that kind of throws in a wrench in my plan and grab a buff and gank. But I mean, I just assume the gank should be successful. If they're zoning the person out, then they're probably putting themselves in a precarious situation. They should have warding, but if you're pre-level 30, maybe they don't have wards either. So you got to take all those things into account.
Yep. So that is our meta mailbag for today, and I believe that is all we have for the show. Thanks for watching, everyone. Remember to send in any questions you have to ggcmetamusings.com. Again, that's ggcmetamusings at gmail.com. Sorry, at gmail.com. That's the email that you send any questions to, and we'll try to get to those in the next show.
Sounds like a plan to me. And like always, another exciting support, exciting, unusual, and hopefully a really good topic. I'm excited.
Yep. So catch us next time, Friday, same time. 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, which is the time that we're both on, actually. So I guess we should just only mention the Pacific Time from now on, because that's the only relevant time.
Yes.
But, yep, so see you all next week, and have a good night.
I agree.